Hey everybody, this is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Rogue Rant. Today I want to talk about what you're going to see here in the screen. Sometimes I got to start it and restart it. But this is drone footage, and this is over home Syria. And it shows the mass destruction that's taken place over the last, 5, 6 years? With their civil war. The proxy war is what it should be really defined as. And I'm showing this because it illustrates what the new weaponry that ISIS is using. And that's drones. Yes, today I shared an article where they've used a drone with explosives laying to it that killed a couple people. And this what is in our future. This is a serious issue when you look at the United States. So we gotta come up with a way to deal with these guys. We should have had a way to come up with dealing with this, but we haven't. You know, I'm skeptical of the willingness of the Obama administration to handle ISIS. And that's because of what we've seen. They have an objective of getting Assad out of there, Assad Bashar. They want him out of there because of the pipeline. He didn't want to play ball. So they're fighting this proxy war through Saudi Arabia there. Then you got Russia. They want the extremists out of there. And they're fighting the proxy war through Iran. And nothing was being achieved until Russia said, that's it. We're coming in, bombing the hell out of ISIS. And now something's starting to be achieved. But the United States stands in the way. We still funnel money to these moderates that are essentially extremists, walking hand in hand with ISIS there, with Al-Qaeda there, Al-Nusra there. You know, Hillary, she made some good points in her debate. She said, look, guys, we got to work with our allies there. We got some allies. We got Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman. They're all friendly towards us. They're all willing to help. And yes, some of them are, but let's look at Saudi. They were involved in the 9/11, without a doubt. They're dealing with these Islamic extremists, without a doubt. They're training them. They're financing them. They're supplying them with weapons that are being funneled through them. But compared to regime, Iran, they may be the better regime to work with. And think about it. How else are we going to funnel weapons to Libya, Iraq, and Syria? How about Jordan? They fought alongside with us. That king's been really great with us. He's taken in about 30,000 refugees. They've had soldiers burned alive. They've had deaths there. It's really been a burden on their economy, the whole refugees. But then you look at Saudi Arabia, they have enough tents for 1 million people, 1 million refugees with air conditioning in the desert. And guess how many they've taken? 0. And they're the ones that started this over that whole Syrian pipeline. And Assad is he's showing a lack of willingness to work with the United States with that pipeline. But let's get back to Hillary and Donald. You know, Clinton bears a lot of responsibility for the present state of affairs there, from Libya being the leader of the actions taken there, but simply because her and Obama failed. They failed, like when it came to the status of the forces agreement that George Bush had there. They decided they didn't want to secure a deal, which they could have in many different ways, but they didn't because it wasn't in their political agenda. Again, politics getting in the way. So they're sitting there blaming Bush for all of it. And Bush is just as culpable, folks. His actions in pushing to isolate the pro-Saddam Shiite region led to the actions by the Shia towards the Shiites. Evolved into Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually evolved into ISIS. Because the pro-Saddam forces were isolated. They were no longer part of the government. And next thing you know, and the new president was coming down. The majority were coming down on them. And they created this whole ISIS. I wrote a whole article on it. You can check it out on my Uncensored Report. You got Trump on the other hand, though. And he has a lot more right, I think. I think this because he's correct that Hillary is revealing too much of her playbook to the Islamic State. Just like Obama is. Hey, guys, we're going to bomb there in an hour. You may want to clear out. If they're recruiting online, they're probably looking at this stuff. And they're saying, oh, that's their game plan. We need to do this. They're still considering ISIL a JV team. They're underestimating them. They're tipping our hand. And Trump was right that we need that a residual force in Iraq would have arrested the development of ISIL there. It would have kept it under control, perhaps confining them to Syria. But that being said, while Trump is likely to bomb the heck out of ISIS, what is missing is the appropriate follow-through. The follow-through that is needed once a decision's been made, and that's always missing, it seems like. And let's be clear, once we get the go-ahead, the United States can go in there within 30 hours of the final goal. We can blow the hell out of these terrorist groups, punishing them. You know, probably within 30 days, we could have 2 division of American ground troops there to help the Iraq forces chase Islamic fighters back into their holes. But that is a short-term solution that may lead to deaths, American deaths. And the problem is that Trump isn't thinking about what to do after the initial round of fighting, like most politicians never do, or always do, I should say. And we don't want to repeat the mistakes of George W. Bush and Barack Obama in that region, do we? Think about it. They didn't finish the job, as we don't finish the job most of the time. That's how it is most of the cases. Sorry, I'm distracted trying to keep the screen from stopping. But think about it. U.S. had sent troops back into harm's way. Bush Sr.'s mistake had American troops going back a decade later. I was in the military in the Navy during the Persian Gulf War, during Bush Sr. Obama had Americans go back 3 years later after they left. He says they're special forces. They're not fighting. That's bull, folks. They're in the fight. To defeat the Islamic State over the long term, the best option is to look at what we did after the Korean War. Think about it. Unlike the fight with Islam, the Korean War was a draw, and we came up with an armistice that was signed. The U.S. turned that draw into a strategic victory, I think. If you look at the fact that there hasn't been bloodshed in, 50 years there? It took a residual force. But back in the 80s, South Korea, they became a capable partner, able to manage their own territory. And by 2000, that country pretty much could take care of themselves. And that's what we need to see in Iraq. And the good news is, folks, that Iraq is not as bad off as South Korea was back in '53. The bad news is that it will still take a long time, and it will require a lot of patience, something we don't always see with Americans. And that is somewhat of an open question with Trump. It will require that he listen to the warning that George Bush put out back in 2007 when he said the consequences of leaving too soon are damaging. I believe we can salvage this situation. We got to look at it from a long term, though. And it requires an honest look at what must be done. A realistic look. Being honest with the Americans that deaths may be lost. But we might lose 100 deaths now, 100 soldiers, and save thousands of people down the road. In Syria, we have to look at these war hawks. Kick those guys out of the game. Like I said, the only reason they were there is because the globalists wanted their greedy desire to go in there with the Syrian pipeline. Bashar wouldn't play games. He wouldn't play with the home team, the United States. And so they wanted him out there. And that's what happened essentially with Gaddafi. He wasn't playing ball the way the United States wanted him to. They drove him out, and look what the mess it is there now. It's a terrible nightmare in both countries. And it's sad, it's tragic what we're seeing there. So many lives lost, and look at what's the consequences that have come from this. The only people that have won from this is the military industrial complex, folks. And the politicians, maybe. The poor people of these countries, they're all dying in Yemen, in Saudi, in Syria, in Iraq. The refugees are coming here, and within those refugees, you have a lot of terrorist cells. The Muslim faith is blamed to being a terrorist organization because of a few bad apples that are involved in it. It's a travesty. All right, this has been Francesco Abbruzzino with another Rogue Rant.